Before Denzel. Before Wesley. Long after Sydney opened the door, there was Howard Rollins. Not the next Sidney Poitier, not the black hope of Hollywood. Just a young man from Baltimore with more talent in his voice than most actors carry in a lifetime, and more pain than anyone ever cared to see. People called him gifted. Producers said he was unforgettable. Carroll O'Connor himself said he had never worked with an actor more naturally brilliant. But here's the truth nobody wants to face. Howard Rollins had everything: respect, roles, awards, momentum, and still lost the fight against the demons chasing him long before fame ever arrived. This isn't a Hollywood fairy tale. This is a man who rose fast, glittered bright, and crashed hard publicly, painfully, and alone. A man who carried the expectations of being the next great black star, all while battling addiction, legal trouble, illness, and a loneliness so deep it swallowed him whole. No rumors. No myths. Just the real story of a man whose talent was big enough for the world, but whose burdens were bigger than he could bear. So let's start from the beginning. Let's walk through the rise, the fall, and the heartbreaking reality of Howard Rollins, the man Hollywood praised, ignored, and finally forgot. Because some stories don't need decoration. They just need to be told. Howard Rollins came into the world in Baltimore, the youngest of 4 children, born into a household held together by working-class hands. His mother cleaned homes. His father worked steel. There was nothing glamorous about the life he stepped into, nothing that hinted he would one day be compared to Sidney Poitier, nothing that suggested Hollywood was waiting for him. But from the beginning, Howard carried something that didn't quite fit the neighborhood he grew up in: a quiet grace, a thoughtful mind, and a natural pull toward art. As a kid, he loved the saxophone. Music was his first doorway out of Baltimore's noise, a place where he could breathe. School opened the second doorway. He went to Towson State College to study theater, but his plan was simple. He wanted to become a teacher. Acting wasn't even a dream. It wasn't on the map. Then one summer day changed everything. He was working a porter job at a Sears across the street from his house, just steady work. Nothing special when a friend named Frank Knox convinced him to tag along to a casting call. Howard didn't know the girl Frank liked. He didn't know the play. He didn't know the process. He had never acted a single day in his life. But he went anyway, just to support a friend, just to stand in the room. And when the director asked him to read, something happened. Something clicked. Howard opened the script, spoke a few lines from Of Mice and Men, and the room shifted. The director saw it immediately, that calm presence, that intelligence behind the eyes, that natural control. Howard got the role. And in that moment, months of confusion hardened into clarity. He wasn't meant to teach. He was meant to act. His parents didn't understand it. They told him the truth as they saw it. Black people don't become movie stars. Get a real job. They weren't being cruel, they were being protective. They'd lived long enough to know how the world treated black ambition, but Howard wasn't turning back, not after feeling what he felt on that stage. He dropped out of school, packed a small bag, took $300, and moved to New York. No connections. No guarante. Just talent and a willingness to fight for it. New York responded quickly. Casting directors noticed the same thing the Baltimore director saw. Howard didn't push. He didn't pretend. He didn't chase the room. He held the room. He landed roles in serious plays, heavy dramas, and off-Broadway productions that demanded emotional depth far beyond his years. He performed in We Interrupt This Program, a tense thriller. Medal of Honor rag, where he carried the lead. The Mighty Gents, with Morgan Freeman. G.R. Point, a Vietnam War piece. And people kept talking, kept watching, kept asking the same question. Where did this guy come from? Then television noticed. He joined PBS's Our Street, one of the first black soap operas. Suddenly, he wasn't just a stage actor. He was becoming a national presence, a voice, a new face for dramatic roles black actors rarely got the chance to touch. Howard Rollins had found his lane, and he was accelerating fast. But the role that would change his life was still waiting. Howard Rollins didn't just rise, he ascended, the way only a naturally brilliant actor can. New York had given him a stage, but Hollywood was about to give him a spotlight. And that moment came when he auditioned for Ragtime. He walked into a room where giants had already read O.J. Simpson, Lou Gossett Jr., Richard Pryor, men with names, careers, reputations. Howard was the unknown kid from Baltimore. Yet when he performed, everything tilted toward him. He walked out believing the role wasn't his. Then the phone rang, and Howard Rollins fell to the floor, crying. The role of Coalhouse Walker Jr. did more than change his career. It introduced America to a new kind of black leading man, elegant, controlled, emotional without begging for sympathy, proud without performing pride. His work earned him major nominations and put his name beside performers who had been in the game for decades. Hollywood had seen a spark. Now it saw a fire. Soon he appeared in television films, strong dramatic parts that fed his range. Then came the daytime world, All My Children as an FBI agent, followed by Another World, earning him a Daytime Emmy nomination. Every role confirmed the same truth. This man didn't play characters. He became them. But the performance that cemented him as one of the greatest dramatic actors of his generation was his portrayal of Medgar Evers in For Us the Living. It earned him an NAACP Image Award, but more importantly, it earned him respect from Black America, the community he never forgot, the community that understood what it meant to portray a man murdered simply for daring to lead. Then came the masterpiece, A Soldier's Story. Howard played Captain Richard Davenport, a black military lawyer sent to Louisiana to investigate the murder of a black sergeant during the Jim Crow era. He carried the role with a stillness that cut deeper than any shouting ever could. Surrounded by a cast that included Denzel Washington, David Alan Grier, and Patti LaBelle, Howard didn't blend in. He stood out. His intelligence dominated every scene. His presence held the frame. And behind the camera, tragedy was unfolding. Howard's father passed away during filming. Instead of collapsing, he buried his pain and let the work carry it. His performance became sharper, heavier, more anchored. People who knew him said he used his grief as fuel. After A Soldier's Story, something shifted. Hollywood should have opened every door for him, film leads, prestige dramas, top-tier roles. But the doors didn't swing wide. They barely cracked open. So Howard turned to television again. Then came the role that made him a household name, Virgil Tibbs in the Heat of the Night, the television adaptation of the legendary film once carried by Sidney Poitier. Carroll O'Connor wanted Howard from the very beginning. He saw the intelligence, the dignity, the quiet authority, and America saw it too. The show became a hit. Howard became a star. And for the first time in his life, he was standing exactly where everyone always believed he belonged. Front and center, powerful, undeniable. It should have been the beginning of a long reign. But fame doesn't care about fairness. And tragedy was already waiting for him, just beyond the bright lights. Success didn't break Howard Rollins. Life did, piece by piece, quietly at first, then all at once. At the height of his fame, while In the Heat of the Night was pulling in millions of viewers and solidifying his place as a dramatic powerhouse, Howard's private battles began to claw their way into the open. The pressure of carrying a groundbreaking role, a black detective standing confident and equal beside a white police chief, weighed on him in ways the public never saw. And instead of finding relief, Howard turned to the one thing that promised escape: drugs. The arrest came fast. Cops pulling him over for speeding, finding crack cocaine, adding a drunk driving charge. The headlines exploded, dragging his name across every tabloid. Fans were stunned. Producers were angry. Studios whispered. Hollywood has a long memory for black mistakes and a short patience for black redemption. The judge forced him to create an anti-drug video, a punishment disguised as a lesson. But inside, Howard wasn't learning. He was hurting. When he entered rehab, it wasn't because he wanted help. It was because everyone around him begged him to take it, even as he confessed he didn't want to live through it. He came back to the show after his first stint in rehab, smiling, working, trying to steady the ground beneath him. Carroll O'Connor defended him publicly, standing against tabloids that claimed Howard had been fired. Carroll believed in him, protected him, but belief can't cure addiction. The cycle returned. Late arrivals, missed shoots, no shows, excuses, fear behind his eyes. The second arrest landed harder, another case of driving while impaired, another wave of legal trouble, another public wound. And when the reckless driving charge came after that, the network had had enough. They removed him from the show. The role that had once saved him was now gone. Howard tried again, rehab once more, another attempt at climbing back. And for a moment, it seemed like he might do it. He returned as a guest star in the final season, his face on screen again. His talent still intact, but the damage was already done. By then, studios avoided him. Casting directors hesitated. Agents grew quiet. And Howard, once the brightest young dramatic actor on television, found himself scrambling for roles, any roles, while trying to convince the world he wasn't being denied work because he was black. He believed his career was slipping not because of his mistakes, but because Hollywood had a limit for how much trouble a black actor was allowed to have. Then came the illness, the rumor, the denial, the fear. People whispered that he had AIDS. He rejected it. Friends rejected it. Carol O'Connor even publicly defended him, but illness has no interest in public opinion. When Howard finally heard the truth: lymphoma, AIDS-related complications, something in him unraveled. The man who once commanded a room with stillness now turned inward, fractured, desperate to hide the reality he could no longer outrun. He began dressing as a woman in his final months, slipping into wigs, gowns, high heels, not for performance, but for refuge. Because when he became someone else, he could forget. Forget the sickness, forget the pain, forget the career he lost, forget the world that once applauded him and then abandoned him. Howard Rollins was no longer fighting for fame. He was fighting for comfort, for dignity, for breath, and in the end, even that became a battle he could not win. When America looked at Howard Rollins, it saw two different men. On screen, he was strength, elegance, calm authority, the kind of black leading presence this country rarely allowed to exist. He brought dignity to every role, especially at a time when black actors were still forced to fight for space, respect, and complex characters. He didn't just act, he elevated. He changed what a black man could look like in primetime television. But off-screen, America saw something else, and too often, it chose to look away. The truth is this: Howard Rollins lived and suffered inside a country that loved black excellence, but had no patience for black vulnerability. America praised his talent, but it had no structure to protect him from the pressure that came with it. It celebrated his rise, but abandoned him when he started to fall. His addiction became tabloid entertainment. His legal troubles became gossip. His illness became rumor. His humanity was never part of the headline. And that's a story Black America knows too well. Communities who watched him rise understood the weight he carried. They understood what it meant for a black actor to be constantly compared to Sidney Poitier, not as praise, but as pressure. They understood what it meant to fight addiction while being watched, judged, and punished more harshly than white stars fighting the same demons. They understood how loneliness grows in the cracks left behind by fame. In the 90s, the fear and stigma around AIDS were powerful enough to erase a person before they even died. Many black performers never got the chance to speak openly about their diagnosis. Some hid. Some denied. Some simply collapsed under the shame society forced onto them. Howard was one of them. His illness was whispered about, mocked, dismissed, then weaponized. America never gave him room to be sick. Never gave him room to heal. Never gave him room to be complicated, fragile, or human. Yet even through all of this, Howard Rollins remains a symbol not of tragedy alone, but of truth. A reminder that brilliance does not equal protection. A reminder that the entertainment industry can lift a person up and crush them in the same breath. A reminder that mental health, addiction, and illness do not discriminate. And a reminder that talent cannot silence pain. To older black audiences who remember him from In the Heat of the Night, his story still stings. Because he represented possibility.
Before Denzel, he represented what could have been a long after Sidney opened the door. And there was Howard Rollins, the kind of talent
not
that
the
deserved
next
to
Sidney
age,
Poitier,
to evolve,
not the black hope
to keep
of Hollywood.
shining. Just
In
a
the
young
end,
man from
the lesson
Baltimore
Howard
with
leaves
more
is
talent in his
painfully
voice
human.
than most actors
Greatness
carry in a
means nothing
lifetime
if a person
and more
has no
pain
place
than
to
anyone
rest.
ever cared to see.
Fame means
People
nothing
called him
if a
gifted.
person loses themselves.
Producers said,
and
he
no
was
amount of
unforgettable.
talent can carry
Carol
someone
O'Connor,
who
who
was
was
drowning alone.
said he had never worked
Some
with an
lives
actor
leave
more
behind
naturally
applause.
brilliant.
Other lives
But
leave
here's the
behind
truth.
lessons.
Nobody wants to
Howard
face.
Rollins left both
Howard
wrapped in
Rollins
brilliance,
had everything,
buried in
respect,
pain,
roles,
carried by a talent
awards,
too large for the
momentum,
world he
and
lived
still
in.
lost the fight
He
against
walked into
the
Hollywood
demons
with an
chasing him
elegance
long
people
before
weren't ready
fame
for.
ever arrived.
A kind of quiet fire
This isn't
that
a
didn't need
Hollywood fairy
permission to
tale.
exist.
This
He
is a
wasn't
man who
supposed to
rose
make it out of
fast,
Baltimore,
glittered bright,
He wasn't supposed
and
to
crashed
stand
hard
beside
publicly,
legends,
painfully,
He wasn't
and
supposed to
alone.
redefine
A man
what
who
black
carried the
dramatic actor
expectations
could
of
look like
being
on television.
the next great black
But he
star.
did.
All
And
while
even when he
battling
fell,
addiction,
even when the
legal
world
trouble,
turned him into a
illness,
headline instead
and
of
a
a human
loneliness
being,
so deep
the
it
truth
swallowed
never
him whole.
changed.
No
Howard
rumors,
Rollins was extraordinary.
no myths. He carried
Just the
dignity
real
into
story
every
of a
role,
man whose
even
talent
when he
was big
struggled
enough
to
for the
carry
world,
himself.
but whose burdens
he shined
were
in
bigger than he
places
could
where
bear.
black men were
So
rarely
let's start
allowed
from
to
the
shine.
beginning.
He
Let's
opened
walk
doors
through
without
the rise,
announcing it,
the fall,
simply by
and the
standing in the
heartbreaking
frame and
reality
refusing to
of
shrink.
Howard Rollins,
Some
the man
stories
Hollywood
end
praised,
without closure,
ignored,
but dignity
and finally
doesn't need
forgot.
applause.
Because some
And Howard
stories never
don't need
lost
decoration. To anyone out there who has ever battled demons in silence, came into the world in Baltimore, who has ever felt their talent overshadowed by their pain, children, who has ever faced a household held together by working class hands, directly to you. His mother cleaned homes. It says, his father worked steel. Your struggle matters. There was nothing glamorous about the life he stepped into. Your truth nothing that hinted he would one day be. He didn't get the long career he deserved. Nothing he didn't get the redemption arc the public wanted. But he left behind something deeper. Howard carried something greatness and that didn't quite fit the neighborhood he grew up in, and neither one defines the whole thoughtful mind. If his story touched you, hold it gently. As a kid, remember the saxophone, not just the tragedy. Was his first doorway out of Baltimore's noise, not just a place where he could breathe. And remember, that behind every gifted soul is a private battle. He went to Towson State College to study theater. Howard Rollins may have left this world too soon. He wanted to become a teacher. His impact, acting wasn't even a dream. It wasn't and the next time you see a black actor then one summer day in a changed everything. With depth and dignity. He was working a porter job who helped carve that across the street from his house. Rest in just power. Steady work. Howard Rollins. Nothing special. Your life friend named Frank Knox convinced him to tag along to a casting call and into the truth. Howard didn't know the girl Frank